Greetings, humans who can definitely hear me, and welcome to another Core Academy stream. We are going to be talking about saving data, and saving means a lot of different things. So I've done streams previously. We've talked about persistent storage. We've talked about using leaderboards. We've talked about cross-game storage. A lot of these you can find right now on the Core YouTube, which is linked in the description for this channel. But today what we're going to be talking about is all the different ways you can save data for players primarily, since players are kind of an important part of games, but it's really about all of the different ways you can save information that you need. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new project for this, but I think I'm going to actually need to fork a couple projects because we're going to be using a couple of example projects, both of which I've used before, shown before on stream. So we'll talk about that when we get to that point, but we're going to be talking about everything not saved, and we'll make that project now. So I'm actually going to start with the Core API right now, because what I wanted to start with is, okay, what data is already really easy to save for players? So I'm going to go to the player class here, which is in my URL. No, that didn't work. Okay. Player. And players are really interesting because although they're in your game and we can now see them in multiplayer preview, or in a single player preview. So if I start let's say single player preview right now, you'll see that now I as a player appear here. But for the most part, players are not objects that you can edit in the hierarchy the way a lot of other things are. So I couldn't just say add a custom property to a player or something like that. So they're kind of an interesting case. So if I look at player, we're going to look at the properties down here. We'll find that there are a bunch of things that we can change. So I could change like a team value. Theoretically, I can change a player's name, which, could be cute if you wanted to say like add a title to everybody's name. Suddenly I'd be like Mr. Slinkus or something, Captain Slinkus. I like that. There are reasons that you could do that in a game that make sense and aren't going to cause you problems down the line. The kind of the interesting ones that come down to a something that you could like count up and keep data on a player are kills and deaths. So this is like the simplest thing one could possibly add to a player. Let's go ahead and we're going to create a new script. We're actually going to generate a new script using the player join event, because the challenge with players when you want to do something to a player is you first need to get a reference to the player you want. So you need a way for Core to figure out which player you want. It could be the player who entered the trigger. It could be the player who owns the ability if I already have a reference to the ability, right? If this ability exists, it probably has an owner, and then I can find it out. But if you just start the game and I say player, the game doesn't know who that is, and chances are, as it loads, there aren't any players in it initially. So we're going to go ahead and change this to player join leave, because this is really great. In this case, both of these functions give me a situation where the player is whoever just connected and whoever just left. And that's awesome. Everybody connects and everybody leaves eventually, inevitably. So this is a really, really useful script for testing anything I want to do on players. I'm going to call it player join leave because I always do. Because that's what happens in this script for right now. Okay, and what I want to do is I'm going to say player.kills equals 12. And then I'm going to UI.print to screen player.kills. Okay, so that's really easy, right? And let's see, I think this works. Let's make sure we actually drag our script into the hierarchy. We'll then press play and player join leave expected string got color. All right, we got errors already. The event log says it is on line 4 expected string. Oh, that's because player.kills is not a, I guess that needs to, all right, we'll to string this and make this into a string. since it is a number, the print, so this is kind of an interesting thing that you might not know, is that the print method in core turns things into strings for you. So a lot of times, I'm like, hey, print this object, and it's like, yes, core object, or player, or trigger, or whatever type of object it is. And that's actually kind of like a nice thing that it's doing for me. But if you use the warn method, you need to actually carefully convert things to strings. So we can see here in this very, very well-designed feedback interface, we see the number of kills. I changed the number of kills the player has. So just to give you kind of some info on this, if I wanted to print player kills, right? Watch this. I'll print player kills. And we will also warn player.kills. So we'll put both of these up here. And then I'll stop, that script will update, and we'll press play, and we'll see that we get a couple of things. So, boom, down here. Oh, I lost it. There it is. Okay, so we got the player joined. That's being printed from that event that I use automatically, so that's just a print statement that I didn't take out. And then we printed the number 12, and this time I didn't have to use toString. Print just turned it into a string for me. But in line 5, it says see player join line 5. When I used warn, it did not allow it. So what I have to do with warn is I have to do a toString. And like I said, no caps. Yeah. We'll run this again, and we'll see kind of what the difference is in the way print and warn work. And this is really useful, especially if you're like me and you end up with like way too many print statements in all of your projects. So when I printed the player kills after I changed it, it just gave me the number 12. It just put the thing that I asked in there. With the warning, it actually tells me what script is calling it, which line is calling it, and then the result. And that is really nice, because when I'm like, where is this random number 12 coming from, which could easily happen even in the course of working on this script right now today, I have a clear indicator of where this is coming from. So I like using warns a lot. You can also like manually add this in, but obviously it's not going to update the line. You're changing your line numbers on your code constantly, probably. And so that is, that's a really nice advantage of warn that I learned from Mordecai. Okay, so player kills, player deaths, these are all things that we can actually just change and accommodate. And if you look up, let's see here, meta leaderboard. So Team Meta has a bunch of leaderboards, but if you go into the code, right, what they count are, let's see if we can make this image bigger. Let's see, this isn't going to improve the resolution, which is the problem here. But if I go into this, we'll see that I can count kills, KDA, right, which is kills, deaths, and assists, and total deaths, right? So we're basically looking at things that are using these like built-in player information that we have for kills and deaths. So that's really easy. Now you could obviously use that to mean something else, right? You could have, you could have players, I don't know, die every time they reach a checkpoint and then respawn at the nearest, spawn point. That's where you respawn. And you could use that to actually count like how many checkpoints they've reached or something. I don't know. I mean, that's very hacky, and it's not really necessary. So the next thing I'm going to look at is resources. So resources, we can't just like set like this, because resources, you can create them. It's kind of this bigger table. So we're going to use a get and set function, right? And we also have an add and remove. Oh, there's a remove? Yo, did you know there's a remove resources? I have been adding negative resources. What? Does not go below 0? That is convenient. Wow, that's so nice. I've been doing so much work I didn't need to do. So basically there's a couple of things we can do, right? We can get resources and get the entire table back. We can get a resource using basically a key, right? The same kind of way you would with the table. And I wonder, can you set all of the resources? I don't think so. That would be a little concerning. But I guess you could clear them. And then you could go through the table and set them. Anyway, yeah, it could be new, or it could be that I'm learning about new things every day. Did you know? We'll get to this in storage, but we'll get to this when I get to player storage. Okay. So, and by the way, the climactic part of this stream is at the end of it, I am going to make badly in MS Paint a flowchart on when you would use each of these methods. So get psyched. We've got flowcharts coming, friends. I know. Too much excitement for one stream. This is like, wow. This is like some play with the devs tension with how much excitement we have over this. So with resources in code, right, I can set something else. So let's take away the player kills, and let's give the player a resource. What is the currency or resource that we're going to give a player? We'll say player player colon set resource. What do we want to call it? Slinks. And they will get 10 of them. We got 10 slinks, right? So now I do this with the player and absolutely nothing happens. But what's really cool is if you don't want to use the code to do it, we already have a resource pickup. I've done actually a bunch of tutorials for this. This is actually one of my favorite things. Where is it? Resource pickup. Let's check out resource. So the resource pickup, I could just add in, I could say how much it's worth, and it's a whole trigger that gives that to the player. It's super nice. I'm going to throw in this other one that I always love and I use often in those things, which is the resource display. So resource display goes up in this corner. I am going to do something I almost always do with it, which is to find the text and change the font to be much larger. Obviously, this is like the local preview. I'm not seeing it. So let's try 16. Let's see. Yeah, that should be it. 24. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so now that's at least somewhat legible, and I will zoom in on it when we do it. And then the only thing I need for this resource display to show the resource I want is to change here this custom property resource name. So because the resource is just a table, right? So all of the ways we access it, the keys, are strings. So in this case, it's looking for a resource called gems. My player won't have it, but this is kind of nicely set up, so it's not going to break because of that. And we're just going to change this to slinks. Boom. So now we see that I have, as soon as that sorry. So it has this other thing. Let's go ahead and just change this and start the preview again. So by default, this is set to only show when the resource changes. It kind of pops up and goes away. And that's really nice if you want an immersive experience that still gives player essential information but doesn't keep that HUD up constantly. But I am trying to illustrate a point right now, which means that I need it to stay up, especially after this preview mode starting thing. So if we look at this, we can zoom in here and see that there are 10 slinks. Can a resource be a decimal? I think not. I think a resource is an integer. However, we do have options if you want decimals. So, which brings me to my next thing. That's actually, Zulu brought it up perfectly. The big limitation of using resources. It's not that there's really a reason. Resources is a table. It doesn't have to be an actual resource. It doesn't have to be something the player can get in the game. And I'll tell you my favorite hack for this is if you use the dialogue. Let's look at this. Yes, this right here, the dialogue system with NPCs. So this is published by Honey, but it is just pulled out of Core Haven back before the new Core Haven Chronicles came out. Back before that came out, when Core Haven was just kind of a social space for the dungeon games. This dialogue system was in here, and it's really nice, but it's really just designed to be a dialogue system, which means the only thing, you can't get the dialogues to start events. Like if a person chooses a particular dialogue option, there's not, at least in the API the part of the API that I was looking at, I couldn't find a way to make that broadcast an event, which would be nice, right? If you can say like, okay, and if you choose this option, then the quest starts or something like that. But what you can do is provide the name of a resource as part of your dialogues API, which if you haven't played with this, by the way, it's actually, once you find the right file to work with, it's very, very easy to use and create dialogues. It's really intuitive, and I highly recommend adding this to any of your spaces where you want people to talk. But what you can do is you can get one of those NPCs that, if you choose an option, will give you exactly one of a resource. And so what I did to basically make an event system is I named those resources after the events I want. I called them tickets because it feels like I gave you a ticket to start the event, right? And used that, had a resource changed event that looks for a change in that resource, checks if there's exactly one, and if there is exactly one, fires the event and then takes away the resource. Which again, I was adding -1 because I didn't know we had a remove resource. So that's amazing. I might have actually been setting it to 0 because you want to clear those out. So that's one way that had nothing to do with an actual resource. I mean, you could imagine there's real tickets in my game and that's a resource, but that wasn't really what that's about. The point was I wanted to use the system. I didn't want to change the code because I didn't want to break it. So instead, I just looked at what was available within it, found this one resource. You can't even be more than one. Because originally I thought I would use the quantity as the key. So we would have like event ticket. And then if they got 1, we do that. And if they got 2, we do another option. You could kind of make like a menu that way. But it's only one resource. And so that is a complete hack that does really an entirely different thing from what I intended, but was really pretty easy. And let me basically hook my own system into this existing thing without damaging it, which is really nice. Okay, so that's resources. So now let's talk about a scenario in which I don't want resources, and I just want data. I just want to say, let's do this. I want to give myself a special status. So what I'm going to say is if player.name equals course Linkus, right? That's me. I should put that in quotes because it's a string like this. So I'm gonna say, okay, if it's me, then do something else. Well, what do I want? I'm gonna say player, and I want to just give myself a status, right? Is game owner, right? I can't just say player.is game owner equals true, right? And we can go ahead and run this and see what happens when we do. Because I am course Linkus. Hopefully I am logged in as course Linkus, and I will get the following error. Error running Lua task. Player join leave 3. Attempt to index set a nil value is game owner on player. Key name does not exist. So if you were creating your own classes, you could just add properties. There is some reasonable caution to exercise in just adding properties, but it'd be something that you could do. So how do I create a system where I can just add a property that I need for my game to the player? Like, let's say kills and deaths is not relatable to my game, and I really just want to track like hugs for this round, something like that. I can create properties using, and we'll pull it up in the API here, because I think people don't see, there we go. Pull it up in the API here, under core object, because you can add this to any object. And that is, just object. Okay, cool. So any object, right, we can add server user data and client user data. And this works really similar to the resource table, right? In that it's a table, I can add as many keys as I want for different values. But in this case, I can actually assign them to anything because it's not networked. So if I wanted to say, all right, I am going to make anyone my best friend. So in this, okay, let me back up right now. This is a server-side script. So of the two, I am going to use server user data. So I'm going to say player.server user data dot is game owner equals true, right? So this is one of the ways I could write this. This is a table. So I made a property. I made it up. It's called is game owner, and I decided it's a Boolean value. So in this case, I decided it's either going to be a true or a false. I could say, heck yeah, for am I the game owner, right? But it means later if I'm trying to check, instead of saying if player dot server user data dot is game owner. If I do a Boolean, I can stop there, and that just means whatever that is, either true or false, and that's all I have to put in the if statement. But if I do this, I would have to actually say, if the string that I made, this equals, heck yeah, right? It's a little bit more work. So I'd rather just set this to true and use it that way. And it makes sense because it's the kind of thing that's either true or false. Okay, so we're actually going to delete this. And so I can run this. Actually, let's print it. So we'll print... Am I the game owner, right? I'm looking for this server user data, and I will see that if I were doing this with the resource, kind of like I described with the dialogue system workaround, I would just use 0 as false and 1 as true. And that's kind of what I was actually talking about doing. So if I look at down here in the event log, you'll see that it says... it just printed true because we didn't give it any context. But we asked it, am I the game owner? And it said yes. Okay, so let's say, okay. This experiment is complicated. The nice thing about this, there's a couple of advantages. One, I can do something like true. I could do something like, say, the player, I don't know, let's say player height in meters. No, I want a good decimal, but we'll say, yeah, player height equals 6.5. I don't know 6.5 what's, but we're just going to go with it. I can add decimal values, I can add strings, and I can actually make this references to other objects because it's all going to be saved here. So let's say this is a weird scenario, but I can't think of another one where I want to say that we assign each other friends, right? So I could actually assign the entire player object. If I want to, I probably don't need to. Like, if you just give somebody the ID of a player, then you can, like, if I were broadcasting and I needed to send a player, right, I would send that player's ID and then on the client side, look for the player. I wouldn't want to broadcast the entire player object because it's huge. And of course, there's a couple of ways. So this is player server data. And let's say I want to say I am my own best friend. So I'm going to say equals player. And then here I'm going to print best friend, and I'm going to print the name, right? And let's give this some context so that my prints look interesting. So we'll say best friend colon, and then add a comma. Print also lets you do, I did this in anything besides print, it wouldn't be one string and it would get very confused. So we're going to do this now, and we're going to say, we'll press play. And if I look, it says that my best friend is Corslinkus. Now, I did this because there's not another player, so there's nobody else I could do. If I said we could do, all right, we'll do a multiplayer version of it. The problem is multiplayer, I need to, okay. So this is an interesting problem, right? Let's say I want whoever connects second to be the best friend of the person that came before them. Well, we have a weird scenario, which is what happens to the first person. And then, like, do players really connect in order? There's a little bit much, but you can see I can't actually just assign this entire player to it. I might assign it by the name or the ID, would probably be more efficient, but this is, really easy. And it means that I could say player dot, weapon and give them the entire weapon if I want to. Player dot server user data dot weapon. So what's the disadvantage of server user data? Well, I can't get it on the client, right? If I wanted to say, create, let's delete this resource display, but let's say I wanted to create, let's go back to core content. Let's get a UI. Let's even do a world text. So I want to just put text in the world, put it up here. And I want this to say the name of my best friend, right? So we'll say like, my best friend. And then, actually can't. I can change world text on the server side. I want some UI thing. The point of the story is if I try to use a client side script, I'm not going to be able to access that information at all because it's server user data. Now, fortunately, we have something else called client user data. So client user data would be like really interesting stuff about, like, say I'm controlling the players, like the order in which they've seen a bunch of animations or experiences that they're kind of having individually that needs to be customized per player. I can say, like, let's say I need to mark whether or not they have already seen a banner congratulating them. That's a useful thing. I can put that client side so that if I broadcast to them on the client side, it says, hey, if you've already seen this banner, don't show it. Or say you've already seen this cutscene or something like that. That could be something where I play the cutscene, I mark on you that you have seen the cutscene, and then next time the server's like, hey, you could do a cutscene here. Client says, nah, we're good. We've seen it. Skip. And so there's lots of useful parts of these. What is the disadvantage of both of them? You can't access either of them from each other, right? So now my client user data would not be able to check on the server. So that means what happens when I need something that I can check on both. And that is when I will use two things. And the truth of the matter is using these in conjunction is a really nice thing. So we did this in the Among Us voting video that's up on YouTube right now. When we talked about that voting system, we talked about all the different ways to broadcast between these two contexts, right? Between client and server. But one of the things that you can do besides broadcast, so let's say I would like to send to the client who my best friend is, right? I would say events.broadcast to player, right? Because player is basically one individual client. And that player is going to be player. Let's see here. Let's put both of these should be in that if statement because otherwise there will not be one. And we can take out the best friends and we'll say events.broadcast to player, comma. And this is another case where, like I said, I wouldn't do the player name, right? Instead, I might say, let's say the only place I served it was here. So we'll say player.server user data.best friend. I'm going to say .id, right? And we need an event name here before we have that information. So we're going to say new best friend is what we'll name this event. Okay. So now I have sent this data over to the server. And like I said, I'm not going to just send that whole player because that's a big chunky player to try to just send all of that network data about when all you need to really is a way to figure out which player it is. And this player ID is fine. And I can get the connected players from the client side. Yeah, actually, I'm running out of time to get through everything. So we're going to actually skip the event broadcast and we're going to talk about another thing, right? And that is the global space. Everything not saved was lost. Oh, look at that. Don't even have a script. Oh, we do. Okay. It's just not in the hierarchy. So yeah. Okay. So one of the things I could also do is there is a place you can save global variables. So what we could do, I'm trying to think of a good global variable scenario. So basically what I can do is this _G means global. And in that, we can put like any variables we want. So there's like round started and stuff like that. But there's reason to be cautious like this. So if I said, global.mybestfriend equals, and let's go ahead and just put it the name. So we'll say player.serveruserdata.bestfriend.name, right? This again, I need to put in this if statement. These are really weird scenarios, and I'm sorry I didn't think of a better project to illustrate this before I started. Mostly I wanted to jump around to a bunch of different projects so you could see them in that context. So we'll do that next. We're going to download Werewolves and we'll download another copy of the survival framework. So in this case, right, I could do this, right? And then in any script, anywhere, I believe even client side, I could be wrong, we could print my best friend. So let's just make like another random script. Create new script, and it's called new script because I have that thing. Okay, so what I want to do is I wanted to like wait like 3 seconds or something. This is really janky. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna spawn a task. I'm gonna say task task.spawn. And that means I want you to do this on its own little path. Don't stop anything else that's happening. Just take a little aside and get this thing working on its thing. And this is going to be, I'm going to put an anonymous function in here. And this is a lot of sloppy stuff that I wouldn't normally, this is actually something I would normally do. I just wouldn't normally do it on stream because sometimes you just like making sloppy things on your own time. And I'm going to do task.wait. We're going to give it 3 seconds. And then I'm going to say print _g dot my best friend. Now, of course, if anyone besides me connects, this should just be nil. But let's see, because I'm making it test if I'm course linkus. Oh, we did a multiplayer preview. Okay, well, this is a good test for the thing I said. The event log says nothing. Player left. Okay. Oh, because we didn't actually, this script is not running. That's why. Okay. So I'm going to put new script here in the hierarchy so that it actually runs. And again, all it's supposed to do is, hey, as soon as you load, wait 3 seconds, and then print whatever g.mybestfriend is. So let's run this in a single player preview. Here, let me tab to get the event log open. And it says it's player, which means it got the type and it figured out what it was. It was supposed to be ID. Am I crazy? Are we printing that from somewhere else? Let's see, player join leave. Might have been what's printing player. So let's do my best friend. This should print an ID. Oh, no, my best friend dot ID. Let's do it that way. Okay, it was not doing an ID. Okay, so now we save, and when I press play, I should get this long string of characters that is an ID. I don't know. Our player IDs are not, I don't know. Anyway. So that would be something that I could use later to find the player, is the whole idea there. Okay. So now, is it a problem to put your player ID out? That would be, I know, crazy. Anyway, hopefully not. Okay. So this is a global variable. I can access from anywhere. Let's go ahead and experiment and try to put this in a client context. So I'm just going to right click this. I'm going to say create new context, new client context containing this, and nothing else changes. So I'm going to press play, and actually let's have it save the name instead, because that's weirding me out now. So we'll do .name, which will be course linkus. And then we'll press play. And the question is, in 3 seconds, it prints nil. Okay, so it does not, client context does not have access to the global space. But I've used this before if you have like mini rounds of mini games. So it's not like your normal round start, but you do need basically the entire game to know at any given moment if something has started or not. I'll use true or falses with that. But the thing with globals is that like it's really strange that every single thing should know my best friend, and if I'm not there, why would that be there? So it's a really good for something that is universal and important and big, and you only have a few. But it's not great for things that are particular to players. I would want to associate those with an object. And speaking of associating with objects, let's go back and let's go ahead and save. And I'm going to just pull up an old version of Survival. I have so many copies. Where are they? Survival. Okay, so these are going to be old versions. So if you download it now, you'll have a much better kit to work with. So this is like the coolest thing ever. And I don't know if I've ever mentioned it on this stream. So we should talk about the new magnificent environment variable. This is somewhat unrelated, but important for everyone to know. So environment is now a namespace that you can use to check where your script is running. The script can ask itself if we are in a server context or in a client context. It can also say, is this a multiplayer preview? Any preview. So is preview will be true if it's both the single player preview and the multiplayer preview. Or like the default preview and the multiplayer preview. So you can check that. So in that case, you could just give yourself admin powers without having to check by the name. For example, this is like a really great way to say, like, when I'm testing, I just want you to start the game. I don't want you to wait for me to press the button, just make it go. And you can set up a lot of things. So if you have not seen this new environment checker that was not this patch, but I think just the one before it. It's pretty recent. This is a huge game changer for setting up your own testing situations, and then also potentially like scripts that you use the same script in both server and client, and it just is able to adjust to which one it's actually in. Depending, I've heard of good uses of that. So that's a cool thing. So the reason I wanted to bring up game settings, gameplay systems, item systems, is because if I look at like this registered items category, right, and I go to like pipe and I press F, you'll see that there is nothing actually here. So we have in hierarchy. This is another way to save data that's really useful to you, which is you can just make an empty group that has a ton of data as custom properties. And this is really nice for when I have like a bunch of, I don't know how many different things I'm going to have. I want to be able to edit them in the editor and not just in a massive script where I've got a different list, because if I make a list in a script, I've got to like copy and paste and make sure, like say this is a table, then I've got to like make sure I've got commas in all the right spaces and things like that. It's a little bit more cumbersome to work with than like objects, which I can move around. I can rename it here. I can, and then, it's got a name property, and these are all custom properties added here. I've got a vector 3. We've got an item reference, right, which is the actual object that you get. We've got this rarity property, this type property, and an icon, especially if you want an icon. It's really nice to be able to put here because then I can see it, as opposed to like getting like a string ID icon reference. What if I want to change it? So this is a really nice way if you want to create a table. You just make a folder, and then later when you need the script to deal with it, you just say, okay, get to this folder, get all its children, and for each of them, register them or make them exist or whatever you want to do. So this is like a really cool way to save that information. Now, what are the advantages and disadvantages of this? This is something that you want to set up in the beginning of your game, but doesn't change. You'll notice these are not networked. So none of this is ever changing during the game about this item. And this is standard combo worked on the system. I'm not sure who else, but I've seen standard combo use versions of this for different things. So like in the D&D item shop, you'll see like a similar system, right? Where it basically like you don't really see the physical item. What you see is an empty object that references all the stuff you need for the item. That's super cool. I love it. And so this is a really efficient way, especially if you've got a variable number of things, but you can't change it when the game starts. So it's just not for that. Now, the thing that I haven't mentioned that much is networked custom properties, because networked custom properties are great if you're already going to network something. But like when I first started with Core, I really thought that if I wanted to say like, make something, I just opened Survival Kit 3 again, sorry. So if I wanted to make something that had any property that changed and I wanted to keep track of it, like if I just wanted to know, who my best friend was, this is weird because obviously we can't do networked custom properties on players, but like, let's see, I still need to go to an empty project. But if we wanted to, everything not saved, this is what we want. This is why we need to take screenshots. But if I say let's add a trigger. And I wanted to, this is a silly one. Say I wanted to say something belongs to someone or something like that. The only time I would use a networked custom property, right, is if it's something that needs to be changed from the server and all of the clients need to be able to find out about it. And the really cool use case for this is, let's say, okay, let's say this is the finish line, right? Well, we're going to rename this finish line. Actually, do I have my finish line? There it is. Okay, let's add this because that's very visual. So we will find that in project content. We'll get start finish line and we'll throw this in here. And okay, so now we have this thing right here and it's got these different triggers. So let's say I want to mark on this finish line the last player who finished. There are two things that I would want to do, right? Let's see here, timer start stop. Okay, so this has a whole script associated with it. And I'll just try to explain. Essentially, when somebody starts, we add them to our list of players who are racing right now. And then when they finish, when on the end, begin overlap event with the end trigger. So we've got 2 different triggers on here. It's a little bit confusing. But in this one, I'm going to say who won. And let's say I would like to also, essentially, if I had a scenario where I'm broadcasting that somebody finished, right? And I would say like, okay, let's, we could say, imagine we need to announce who won, right? So let's just imagine we'll say events.broadcast to players, broadcast to all players. Is that right? Broadcast to all players. Finished, and then player.id, right? And that's just anybody who crosses the finish line. We're going to tell all of the other players that they finished. So this is really weird because what I really want is the first place, right? Okay, and what we'll do is we're just going to say, we'll make a winner variable. So we'll say local winner equals nil. Nobody has won. And then we'll say that if there's not, if not winner, right? So if we don't have a winner yet, if that's still nil, then winner equals player. And if the winner is the player, then we're going to broadcast their ID to all of the players. And then on the client side, I'll make an announcement and I'll say, Core Slinkus won, right? We'll set all that up. Now, what happens if, and let's say they have a display on the side that just always tells who the last winner was, right? What happens when someone joins after that person finished the race? And the answer is they wouldn't know who the last person to finish was because it's not, they joined after this event happened. So it never got broadcast to them. But say they're about to be in the next race or something like that, and we want them to know the old winner or the previous record or something like that. So in this case, what I might also want to do is add a custom property to the trigger so that I can keep track of it. If something were already networked, this would be a lot easier. In this case, these triggers aren't networked, so it seems weird. But let's go ahead and we'll finish line, enable networking. We will de-instance and enable networking. And in this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a custom property, and this is going to be we're going to call it a string because it's going to be the ID of a player. And I'm going to call this winner, right? Okay, so right now I would not be able to change this. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to right click this and I'm going to say enable property networking. And that allows me to change it throughout the play of the game. And so what I can do now is I can go to this timer start stop and I can also say, let's see here, which trigger is the trigger that we just connected, is the finish line, set networked custom property. And then it is winner and player.id, right? Okay, so let's go ahead. I have no idea if this is going to work right now, but let's go ahead and we'll run through here and we'll keep on jogging. It's got some motion blur there. Okay. And if you look, we can see now that we've got basically, my player ID again, right here. That is showing who is the winner and populated that into that box. So if I need to say when any player connects, say, hey, check if finish line already has a winner custom property. If so, also populate that in yours so you know who the last winner was. That would be one place where I could save that data. And I could access it on the client side and I can save it from the server side. What is the disadvantage? You can't change a networked property from the client side and find it on the server side. It's only one way. You change it on server, you get it on client. You can read it on the client, but you can't change it. So that's useful when you need to kind of put some static information, because otherwise the only other way for you to communicate between server and client is events. And we know that if you fire too many events, some of them can get lost. Events are not the most reliable, but they are really fast. So what you want to do is do both of these, where I sent the event, and then I also have the networked custom property so that when that changes, I can also update that, and I have this fallback that's really stable and reliable because it's not sending as much network traffic, and allows you to kind of have basically this twofold system that keeps you from having like your event broadcast limit break your game. So that's the idea, because a lot of times, you don't really realize that you're getting close to that event broadcast limit until you've got like a lot of players. And that's when, it's a huge factor, because the same action can take up a lot more energy. Okay. So, okay, I have to show you the best one, because honestly, it is my favorite way to save data. And again, this is going to be for things that you don't, let's see here. See if I can find werewolves. Let's search werewolves. This one. Okay. Space Werewolves Among Us. So this was a game worked on by a couple of cool folks whose names you might recognize from the Core Game Dev Bootcamp. But I just want to show you one of my favorite things about, is it Game Startup? Game Startup. Okay, yes. So in this case, if I look at this script, I'm going to find something called Game Resources. And let's just edit this so you can see what it is. So Mordecai wrote this script, and the idea is that I need tons and tons of these constants, right? These are values that I've decided about my game that everything needs to know about and everything needs to match about. If the max ship oxygen is 100, there are probably multiple scripts that might need to know what the maximum ship oxygen is, because say one of them needs to check if players are dying and another one needs to show a bar that communicates to the players how much oxygen is left, right? One of those is client side, one of those is server side. That's something important to know, right? The message that you display, you can put there. Now, I say it's constant because it's never going to change during my game. But in my development, I might change all of these things. I might decide one day that the other team isn't werewolves, and then I would need to change the message that I send to werewolves. Probably a couple of different, say this is the ability that they get, and this is literally just like the ID for the ability. I've got all of this here. This is information that multiple scripts would want that are kind of like, generic constants, but I've got them all in this like really nice, beautifully organized space, right? So this is like, say here, he even put like what key binding you use to vote. So if I change that key binding, I can just change it here and it'll change in all of the other scripts. This is really, really nice. This is so nice, right? And this is a required script. So if you've never made a required script before, it's really simple. You make a table. In this case, it's named API, but it actually doesn't matter if you need, it actually doesn't matter at all what you call it. You make a table, so we change those values. So in this case, I made a table called API, and then the first key on it is called max ship oxygen, and then it has a value. We add all of those things onto the table, and at the very end, you just return the table. That's how you make a script that you're going to require. And then we'll open up the game starter script, which is the one that actually has this required. And we'll see that it actually requires 3 scripts. ABGS, which is API Basic Game State. Res, which is actually the one we were just looking for. So it called itself API in the script, but in this case, we'll call it res, R-E-S. And then util is also a bunch of scripts that were basically like generic useful stuff that Mordecai has made for lots of different scenarios. Util, you could add any function that you've done a bunch of different times. This is really great. So now if I search res, right? If I search that, what we'll find is here, right? The human, here he wants the human spawn multiplier, right? Which is, in this case, it's trying to figure out what the ratio of humans to werewolves should be. And that's a constant. So if I need to balance this game later, I would just change it on the one script, and then this script would just automatically get that value. So this is like a really powerful, extremely organized way to keep track of your constants in your game. Accessing the API table has to be on a server script or client script or both. On both. You can put it on anything you require because it's not running. It's just a bunch of values or just a bunch of utility functions depending on. So let's look at the util one so we can see kind of a different one that's not constants. So if I look at this, right, these are all going to be functions. This is spawn player equipment. So this says, okay, I just want something that just says spawn player equipment, and it says, okay, we're going to spawn the equipment and we're going to equip it to the player and we're going to do it all in one function, right? All that does is literally reduce 2 lines to 1. But there are things that you do together enough that makes a lot of sense and it makes your code really reasonable. Remove all player equipment. This is a couple more lines, right? Which is said, get all the equipment off of all the players. So both of these, okay, so in some cases, if I look at this, I can't, actually, in this, I could even run this client side, right? I would just be running it. I don't think I can destroy equipment on client side. So in some of these cases, using the properties of them doesn't make sense on client, but especially with those values, you can require them on both. They reference the same script, so even if you change that script, they will both have access to it. It's really nice. And it allows you to keep things synced up on both of those. So say my client needs to know the name of that resource. I can make a nice script that says, here's all the resource names. And things like that. I have a version where I have coffee drink prices. That's, I've got a menu of coffee drinks and they have prices and it's just at a table that returns itself. And that way, every place that needs a coffee can just, look up the price and use that for itself. And so you could use that. I could make a separate community content piece that also just uses the same prices if I wanted to. Okay. So that is the final and my favorite one, the requiring scripts. I didn't use network custom properties are really nice with event broadcasts as a nice backup. Just keep in mind that they're slower. So let's try to make this flowchart. And I have a document to help me with this. Yeah, so we're gonna ask our first question. Do I need the data? Let's make this more boxy. Next data, next session, right? And the answer to that is if yes, right? So let's go ahead and we're going to have this be opaque. Yes, and I'll put that there, right? Then I'm gonna need to use. We're gonna if we need it next session, then almost none of the methods I showed you work. So then the next question I have is, do I need it across games? And if no, let's see here. Let's say if no. Then we're just going to use, actually both of these feed into the same question, which is, I guess, the question I needed to ask first was, sorry, we're here. Okay, so the next thing we need to know with persistent storage is, do I need data about players who are not connected? Because if no, right, let's just copy that. If no, then that's fine. We can just go straight to storage. If I do, then I absolutely need, here, let's add a yes. This is so awkward. Sorry, friends. Yes. Then, oh my gosh. Sorry. Then we're going to go ahead and we're going to use leaderboards, right? Leaderboards are the only way right now that you can get any data for players that are not connected. If you do not need it across games, you use persistent storage. And if you do need it across games, let's go ahead and just copy pasta that. Control C, Control V. Here, then I need shared storage. Okay, so those are my three gosh, I hate that it does that. So these are my three persistent options. So that's one category. So let's head over here to beep. I'm gonna just make this higher so that we have more room, and we'll add a no here. Boom. Okay. So the question is, next one is, next text, does it need to change during the game? And that's really when we're going to get a bunch of our network scenarios. So that's over here. And this is things like, okay, does it need to be accessed on both player and client? And if yes, let's see here. We'll bring this yes just, oops. Bring this yes just down here. Then in this case, if it needs to change during the game and it needs to be accessed on both player and client, then we're going to, and I'll put this in red, this is the case where we're going to use events and networked custom properties. And if it doesn't need to be accessed on both player and client, then also, let's see, I'm going to just add this in a weird color here. All right, first of all, let's just do this. Black. Okay. Does it need to be accessed on both player and client? If the answer to that is no, then, I'm just trying to make it stop. I've been working on learning better skills. And in this case, I'm going to use server user data or client user data. All right, that's just like a nice place to save data. You can also, if it's client only, you can really save it as a variable on a client script in many cases, right? Because that script's instance is running on the client. But we won't talk about that. And then the one that I forgot here, oops, that we'll add here is or resources, right? Because resources you can actually access from both. So that's pretty nice. And then if it doesn't need to change during the game, right? That is when I'm going to add things like, let's see, this question will be like, does it have multiple properties? And that's a scenario where if yes, then it looks like I need to expand my canvas a little bit. Let's see here. Let's get that down here. If it has multiple properties, then I might use an empty object. So let's put that in red. Use an empty object with custom properties. Why is it flashing green? And that's going to be, let's see, I've been missing my yeses and nos. So this is a no. And then here is a yes. And here is a yes. Sorry. Okay, so then I use an empty object with custom properties, and if the answer to that is in fact no, which is going to go at a weird non-left angle. Let's see here. Let's dedupe. No, I don't want that. That definitely looks like it connects from a semantic perspective. So we'll add a no here to make this clear. Please, no. If no, then we're going to, in red, require a script with functions or constants. Okay, so that's, this is my basic breakdown. We skipped kind of like a couple of things with like the ways like, you know, player kills and stuff like that. Those are sort of because they're built into core. They're really easy to check from both. But this is, why does it keep doing that? All right, we're going to use this. So this is kind of, I'm going to go post this on, I don't know where, somewhere in the core Discord. If I still have my core Academy channel, then that's where it will go. Let's make this bigger. 72. What storage to use? All right, never mind. Let me move this down here, and then we'll put our big title here. What saving method should I use? Okay. This is my basic breakdown of different things you can use and how they go together. So anyway, thank you very much for joining me and watching me badly use MS Paint. Let me know if you have any questions. We can continue this discussion on Discord because it's a really complex topic and it's really interesting, but hopefully finding more ways. Oh, I completely skipped globals. Yeah. Yeah, somewhere in here we would be like, I don't know, we'll add a circle. Put this back to 24, and I'm gonna say like, what other stuff did I kind of forget in here? Global variables, global table, that's a useful one, and then we skipped something else that I've forgotten. Yeah, anyway, the point of the story is you've got lots of different options, and hopefully this will help us kind of complicate the stuff that we can use for our game, the data that we can use to allow players to win and lose. We can pick what this is and we can make it whatever we want it to be. So anyway, thank you again for joining me.